Mr. Chairman, I'll have to repeat that again. We're here before, we're currently convening this hearing of the Rental Housing Appeal Board due to the application filed by Mr. Adam Lashner appealing the official warning issued by Mr. Matt Baumann of Radnor Township, the code official, regarding his property here in Radnor Township. We've been notified that they've reached an agreement with the township solicitor, so at this time it'd be appropriate to hear from the township solicitor and put that agreement on the record. Pat, if you could.
Good evening, members of the board. Patrick Armstrong, here on behalf of Radnor Township. We have discussed with Mr. Lashner, who is the owner of the property this evening, a possible resolution for the board to consider. That resolution would entail the current student tenants that he's currently renting to being able to continue to rent the property until the end of the spring semester of 2010, and thereby vacating the premises as of June, July 2010, and thereafter Mr. Lashner would not be permitted to rent to any further student tenants at that time. He would still be able to rent to other tenants, just not student tenants, because he's not a licensed student tenant renter, as Mr. Baumann will testify as to this evening. That being said, if I'm still going to have Mr. Bowman just testify to indicate that there is a violation, and that way the board can consider this possible resolution that the township's agreeable to, if the board would be agreeable to it as well. And I don't know if Mr. Lashner may want to indicate to the board that he's agreeable to what I just represented at this time.
Adam M. Lashner, L-A-S-H-N-E-R. I want to apologize for dragging everyone out here tonight for making a mistake with renting to two students. My wife, who passed away in September, and I think I had thought that the ordinance only applied to undergraduate students. We were clearly wrong. My wife was handling everything for me. Now I'm handling everything, and I'm certainly agreeable to the resolution. If we could let the two students who are on spring break right now, then else they would be here. If they could stay there until the end of the spring semester, so as not to inconvenience them too much, they're from out of town. I certainly would never, rent any more students. I didn't intend to break any laws or pull anything over on anyone. So just wanted to express my sorrow for doing that, and I'll certainly rent to upstanding residents and no students going forward. But I appreciate it.
At this time, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if you have any questions of either the applicant or the township that you may have, so that you're satisfied that this is appropriate settlement, it would be appropriate at this time to ask them if there are any.
Mr. Armstrong, when is the lease terminated?
The current lease, I believe, is the end of July 2010.
Pat, we need to go up to the microphone. Thank you.
The current lease, to my understanding, expires on July 31st, 2010. The agreement is that the students would vacate the premises at the end of the spring semester. I am planning to have Mr. Bowman testify very shortly with respect to some certain things, just so it's clear that there is a violation. If you want to continue with your questions, that's fine at this point in time.
I just have one other question. When is the end of the spring semester?
That we don't know. I believe Mr. Bowman indicated that giving this...
Well, if they're Villanova Law School students, it would probably be mid-May to the third week in May.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lasher, on behalf of our board, we offer our deepest condolences to the loss of your wife.
Mr. Armstrong, seeing no other questions from the board, if you want to present your evidence, and then we'll put their settlement on the record.
Members of the board, I just have some brief questions of Mr. Bowman. I'm not sure where you want him to.
I do. Matthew Bauman, the Director of Community Development for Radnor Township.
Good evening, Mr. Bauman.
Good evening.
What is your title? for
I'm the
Radnor?
Director of Community Development and the Zoning Officer.
And you're responsible for enforcing the rental unit regulations?
That's correct.
And there came a time that you became aware of the property at issue this evening?
That's correct, from an unknown neighbor that called in anonymously, and I followed up with a letter to Mr. Lashner.
And the property is at 141 Summit Terrace?
That's correct.
And in your investigation, you discovered that there are student tenants at the property?
That's correct. It was through Adam Lashner. He was honest and forthright with me, admitted right away that they are two Villanova Law School students, full-time.
And at that time, you received the written lease from the applicant?
That is correct.
And the first violation notice that you issued was for failure to provide the written lease to the township. But
Correct.
subsequent to that notice, you did receive the written lease?
Correct.
Okay. The first violation that you issued to Mr. Lashner was for a violation of 226-7A and B with respect to providing the township with the written lease, correct?
Correct.
And after requesting the written lease, Mr. Lashner did supply you with that lease?
That's correct.
And then your subsequent notification was due to a violation of section 226-7E.
That's correct.
And that section specifically states that no more than 2 student tenants are allowed within a 1,000-foot radius.
Correct. And subsequently, I did my own research, and I have, as an exhibit tonight, showing the property. What we have showing here is the red parcel is 141 Summit Terrace. I created a buffer of 1,000 feet on my mapping system, whereupon it captured 20 other student rentals that currently exist within that 1,000-foot radius.
And the property at 141 Summit Terrace, there were no prior student tenants at that location?
No, there were not.
And therefore, the current student tenants are in violation of the section 226-7E?
That's correct.
And you issued your enforcement notice on January 12th, 2010,
Yes,
and that's cited to 226-7E, correct?
that's correct.
Okay, and you heard the proposed resolution this evening?
Yes, I did.
That the student tenants currently at 141 Summit Terrace would be permitted to reside there until the end of the spring semester, is that correct?
That's correct. And I even, if it's okay with the board, my recommendation would be to, Mr. Lashner recommends it as well, that just because a student, the spring semester expires, I think we should give them additional time to perhaps find another location, perhaps even until July 1st, given that the lease expires July 31st. 6 weeks beyond the semester, I think, is appropriate for them, and plus, it'll give time for Mr. Lashner to secure another tenant as well.
So you'd be agreeable with that resolution so long as there are no further student tenants at that location?
That's correct. I can put it in a letter, and I can send it, and that'll protect the township in the future for any future rentals that will go in there. They will not be students.
And you would be agreeable if that was a decision of this board, correct?
I would be agreeable to that, yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Bauman, rather than it be a decision of the board, I mean, obviously this board is, their jurisdiction is to decide whether or not an application is going to be approved or denied. So I don't know that they need to approve your settlement unless they have an issue with it, of course.
Okay.
But what I would suggest for everyone's protection is that it be basically a letter agreement either from your office, Mr. Bauman, or Mr. Armstrong from your office, if you wouldn't mind sending it to us so I can review it on behalf of the board, make sure that they all approve it. I'll circulate it among the board members. But the agreement is going to be between the two of you. I'm assuming that the application is being withdrawn in light of this agreement so that there's really nothing in front of this board to decide. That's my interpretation of how this is going to transpire. unless either one of you feels differently, any of you, including the applicant.
When you say the application, you mean the application of the applicant?
Correct.
Mr. Lashner?
That's right. Mr. Lashner's application appealing Mr. Bowman's warning.
That's fine. I would just ask that Mr. Lashner represent that in the record this evening.
Mr. Lasher, if you don't mind, and ladies and gentlemen of the board, if you don't mind me doing it in this fashion, I just think we'll conduct a small colloquy just to make sure, Mr. Lashner, that you understand what I just stated, that you're agreeing to withdraw your application in light of the agreement that you've reached with the township. Therefore, there's nothing for this board to decide. Is that correct?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. And you understand what you're agreeing to?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, which is essentially you will not have the right once these students move out at the end of this semester, or as agreed to, I believe it was the end of July, and the specifics will be ironed out in that agreement. But just for a summary of what you've all decided to today, that once they move out, you will not have the right at that particular property to rent to students ever again. Do you understand that?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Just one clarification.
Please, Mr. Armstrong, absolutely.
I believe it was July 1, 2010.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Lashner, it'll be until July 1 of 2010 that you'll have those students remain in the property, at which point they'll have to move out, and thereafter you'll lose the right to rent to students.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, and you understand that?
Yes,
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lashner.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, as stated, I will receive from Mr. Armstrong's office a letter agreement between the applicant, who is withdrawing his application. We'll make sure that the details that were presented to the board are contained in that agreement. If they're not, you can reconvene if necessary. I don't think that's going to occur. I'll make sure that the terms that were stated to us today will be in the agreement, and then we'll make that part of the record at our next meeting. So at this point, unless the applicant or the township have anything else, I'll open it up to the public for public discussion at this time. Through the chair, of course.
At this time, we'll open up the meeting to the public.
Roberta Winters. I live on Williams Road in Rosemont, and I was just one. Roberta, first name, last name Winters. 326 Williams, is in the man's name, Road, and that's in Rosemont. I was just curious, is in terms of violations of similar to this, are there any fines associated with such violations, or is it just the settlement of this agreement? I'm just out of curiosity.
Well, I think in terms of the township's perspective, once Mr. Lashner sent in his rental housing, he was pretty quick with his response to this office, and did not play any games with me, so to speak, and he was honest and admitted right away. And had he not pursued that avenue, then I think normally there would have been citations and fines. But there was a bit of a delay in trying to get the meetings and everybody here since January. But no, he's been compliant the whole way, and he submitted, plus he submitted his $750 for the application as well. Yes, normally there would be fines.
Sarah Pilling, Pilling. I live at 29 Garrett. I think this brings up a point that perhaps somehow, in fact, I wasn't even aware, and I've been involved on a low level with this student housing rental, that this restriction also applied to graduate students. And I think that's something that somehow we might consider making more clear. I mean, aside from having a student rental housing permit, I was not aware that this also applied to graduate students. So I think that's something to make clear to the landlord to the community so that we're more aware of that. Thank you.
Mrs. Pilling, if I may, just since you brought that issue up, just so you know, I mean, obviously, these board members can, if they want to, bring that issue to the attention of the township commissioners, but that's really, they're here, their hands are tied as board members. The law is what it is. If anyone wants to suggest any changes to it, that needs to be brought up with the township commissioners. Unfortunately, that's not within their purview, it's within the commissioners only.
I don't think it's a change in the law. I think it's just a clarification that when it says student, it's undergrad or graduate student. That was my only point, but thank you.
No, thank you, understood.
I believe when the ordinance was first made, we consider a student is a student is a student. We did not say whether it was graduate or an undergraduate. It was a student, quote.
Just to further clarify, I believe the very first case we heard involved 2 seminary students. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, seeing that no other participation from the public, it's appropriate, if you'd like, at this time to close the public portion of the meeting.
At this time, then, we will close the meeting.
Well, actually, just the public portion.
Sorry, the public
No,
portion.
That's fine. And now you can entertain a motion to adjourn, and we'll adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.